Good morning. As you can see, we're not up on the screen. We got the slides for you all present. We're in the background working to try to get the video up and going, but welcome to our first online forum, our online technology forum. It's a space we created specifically to discuss and share information relevant to technologies and solutions. My name's Daniel Ward. I oversee our training and exercise programs here at NCS4, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. The topic today in particular has been an issue we've struggled with as an industry for the past few years, the need to digitize physical infrastructures and increase the use of connected devices has only grown in response to what we're seeing on the public health and safety concerns. So today we wanted to discuss the need to effectively manage and maintain this growing digital environment. But before we get started, I did want to cover a couple of functions within the webinar platform with the group. So first, you will see that we have a hand-raising function, but we won't be using the hand-raising function. However, we are going to encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you're on a mobile device, the bottom of the screen, you should see a question mark. You should be able to click that and pose any question you have as the presenters go through their material. So at any point, please feel free to list a question. If you're on a laptop or a desktop, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that question function there. So again, we encourage you to ask questions as we go through the content at any point in time. So today we're excited to have the group we do to cover this specific topic. So we have Gene Hallman, who is the president and CEO of Bruno Event Teams. We have Cassia Martin, a senior security architect with Amazon Web Services, and Melissa Odegaard, a director of marketing with S2 Global. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get it started with Gene.
Well, thank you, Daniel. I think my role is to set the stage today for the conversation as a whole and to talk about it from an event perspective. My company is 30 years in the making, so I'm what's considered an old head in this business. I've seen it well before event management was digitized. I remember well our first PGA Tour event, we did not literally have the internet. So I've seen the transformation of how events have moved along this technology continuum, but also I see great opportunity in the future to dramatically improve the event experience, both for the event attendee, but also for the event organizer. So I'll go into the first slide. And Daniel, I need some help moving that slide along. For some reason, I cannot advance the slide.
Okay, we are working on it. There it is.
Okay. I think most people intuitively know that events are facing challenging times. And really, I'm talking about prior to the pandemic. The competition for a person's free time has become very intense. There's so many more opportunities for people, especially young people, to do a wide variety of things. And some of the traditional sports have felt this challenge like they've never felt it before. College football, which is obviously extremely popular here in the South, but is considered far and away the second most popular sport in America behind the NFL, has seen attendance decline, as you can see there, over 7% since 2013. Every single year, total attendance going to college football games has gone down. Major League Baseball has seen a decline in attendance that's unprecedented. And even the bellwether of all sports, the NFL, is seeing attendance go down, and last year was the lowest it's been since 2004. And there are a lot of different reasons. I mentioned the competition for a person's free time, but certainly the abundance of televised opportunities is appealing to people, and it's easier, obviously, to sit on your couch with a remote and click through lots of different opportunities quickly and easily, as opposed to going to a stadium or a venue to watch it. So the competition is not only from other things, but it's also from television itself. And then when you start to factor in what is the long-term impact psychologically to a spectator's mindset relative to getting back into large crowds, after the vaccine, will people still hesitate to go back into crowds? So you take the challenge that existed for event planners prior to the pandemic, you combine it with this lingering impact that could be there, will be there, and event challengers have a very challenging world. Next slide, please. So what do event planners have to do? We have to really look internally first and come up with ways to dramatically improve the fan experience. My company's in charge of the game day experience for the University of Alabama football program, for the UAB football program, in part for the Auburn University program, and in part for the Notre Dame football experience. And what our job is to do is to make it so much easier for fans to get into the area of the stadium, to park, and then to get inside the stadium and then get back out and get back home. It's the driveway to driveway experience that we're trying to improve, which is just basically focusing on the basics: traffic, communication, tailgating, RVs, whatever it may be, making sure that the fan has a hassle-free, has an enjoyable experience from just a pure logistics standpoint. So improving the overall fan experience is very important. We also must take each fan and appreciate them in a sense more than we have. And what I mean by that is, don't take for granted that they're coming. And frankly, I think that's part of college football's problem is that for years and years, fans would come and would battle, 2-hour delays in traffic, and they were still coming anyway. And they were somewhat taken for granted. So we can't take them for granted, and we've got to make sure that we're monetizing each fan in a way that we've never done so before, with not only the obvious, which would be sponsorships or the ticket revenue, but the ancillary flow of revenue, be it concessions, merchandise, or whatever it may be, that making sure that on a per cap basis, we're maximizing that person from a revenue standpoint. And then I think security prior to the pandemic was an issue that was top of mind, that everyone was looking for technology and ways to improve it. And that technology in the security area is progressing so quickly, and keeping your arms around the growth and improvement in security technology, and now public health screening, which will be an immediate concern for the next 12 months or so, but it might linger and still be there beyond the end of the pandemic. So much improvement needs to occur in how we stage and monetize our events. Next slide, please. So the first thing we do is look at data management. I mean, every business textbook 101 will tell you that managing your data is the key to a good business. And so that's so simple and fundamental. But when you sit in the chair of an event planner, you look at the fact that you've got such a wide variety of buckets of data that are sitting out there. And you've got such a wide variety of technology that is out there. And some of it is not your technology. It could be embedded within the venue in which you are renting to have your event. So the assumption that the event planner is controlling the venue is obviously not a correct one. In many situations, we're inheriting what they may have. And I can tell you the spectrum and continuum of technology available to us at various venues would blow your mind, and I won't name the venue, but it's a historic venue here in Birmingham that still tears ticket stubs by hand. They put them into literally old paint cans, and they go and count those ticket stubs by hand for audit purposes. And you think, my gosh, this is 2020. Then there are other venues that are very sophisticated, but the problem is you have all these different sets of data that ultimately you want to be able to integrate in order to improve your efficiency, to improve the fan experience, and be able to monetize, as I mentioned earlier, more effectively. Simple things like being able to monitor spectator movement, which is something Disney World's been doing for years. We've got to get to that point where we are being very precise with all of these different areas, integrated, talking to each other without human interference is a key. It's like the Internet of Things. You cannot have, if you have too much human contact in between each of these buckets of data, then obviously your room for error goes up dramatically. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the ticket stub collection and paint buckets. There's still venues that manually check for parking credentials. Then, of course, you've got the standard barcode technology that you see quite often with tickets. And now you see more and more venues going to cashless situations, be it with concessions or merchandise or even tickets. You're seeing now tickets go completely digital. I remember vividly the I guess it was the 2017 national championship game in Atlanta. Alabama played and Clemson, and that was the first college football game that had ever gone completely digital, and they had their share of challenges because of it. But the kinks are being worked out of that, and we're moving toward that. Now you're starting to see facial recognition technology for security purposes, but who's to say that cannot be extended into some sort of known fan type of situation to where you are now credentialing a person and they're gaining access into your venue via facial recognition or retinal scanning or even a fingerprint. All of that technology is there. We just need, as event planners, to work with our venues to move into that direction. Scanning driver's license, of course, CCTV. And you look at all this different technology and you say, well, how do you integrate it all? How do you pull it all together so that in a perfect world, you have one seamless database where everything is communicating to each other without that human involvement? Next slide, please. So I'm getting near the end of my presentation. This is the last slide. And really my job was to set the stage and sort of define the problem. I don't have the answers. I think some of our subsequent speakers can speak more to solutions because they work with solution-oriented companies. But as an event planner, what I'm saying is that, go back to the previous slide, please, is that we've got to come up with a way to come up with a single platform. It's going to be very challenging to get there, but we must work with our various venues and data providers to go to some sort of cloud-based Internet of Things type of situation to where we can create, as I mentioned, known fans, which I think would be a great concept. It's working beautifully for TSA PreCheck, for global entry, for Clear, which I'm a big fan of. I mean, so the technology is there for travelers. What we're talking about is migrating technology that already exists out in the marketplace into the event management space. And by doing so, we can improve the fan experience, reduce our event staffing costs, provide a safer venue, and data security and redundancy should improve when you're integrating everything into a single platform. So it's utopia in a sense. It's not going to be easy to get there, but as event planners, we must strive and work with our technology partners to move rapidly into this space to counterbalance what we're seeing, which is an erosion of live attendance across all sports. There is no sport that's not that is exempt from an erosion of their fan base. Every single sport is experiencing it. Well, the Masters maybe is the one exception, but even the U.S. Open in golf, I'm very familiar with that. It used to be an automatic sellout. They get to a sellout, but it's not automatic anymore. It's becoming tougher and tougher for even premier events to sell out to the extent that they used to. So that's the end of my portion. I'll open it up for any questions. If not, we'll move on to the next presenter.
Hey, Gene, we did have a question. You were talking about all these various technologies that we're trying to prepare for. And obviously there's a wide range of different things we're seeing. You mentioned some of the older technologies or lack of technologies for that matter. But one of the questions we had, and I know that we're not getting too deep into this specific area for this discussion, but your experience in dealing with drone technologies, have you guys done anything out there at this point? And if so, how is that being brought into the venue and its infrastructure from a digital perspective?
Drone technology, well, that's a great question. We can certainly use it on the periphery of the event for things such as parking and traffic, but almost all sport that is outdoor, well, even indoor sport, prohibits the use of drones over the field of play for fear that it will disrupt the competitors, their field of vision, whatever, and disrupt the competition. So there's some pretty strict guidelines. It varies by sport relative to drones that go over the field of play during the actual competition.
Absolutely, and we'll make sure to put in some of those guidelines after the presentation, like all of the webinars we've been conducting. We'll make them available on our website, and we'll certainly pull in some of those guidelines so everyone can see them. And we'll make that available along with the video and the presentation itself. So with that said, we'll go ahead and move to the next presenter, and we'll hand the floor over to Melissa.
Hi, everybody. First of all, I just want to thank Daniel for putting this group together, and Gene and Cassia for participating. This is a topic that we've been actually discussing in a different industry, in the customs and border industry, for quite a while. And we are bringing it to the event space as well. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and just summarize what Gene is saying. So where are we at? We have all these disparate systems. They're sort of working in silos. We have too much or new hardware that we have to integrate into our ConOps, and then we have a lot of databases that are, again, operating in their own space. Another issue that we have is people. So we have staffing. A lot of staff, they need to be trained. There's different roles that the staff can play. Maybe we can consolidate where people are at different times. They need to make educated decisions. They need information. So we have a lot of issues to deal with around staffing. And then reporting. I mean, everybody wants the data. Data is super important these days to be able to make good decisions on what to do next, what's happening now. Get your reports, share them with all your different partners, and really understand what's going on in your industry and to be able to react not just now, but plan for the future. So those are sort of the things that we're going to look at how we get those working together. All right, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. Oops, too many. Okay. So our company really looks at what are you actually trying to do. So as Jean said, we really have to make it easy for the fan to be able to enjoy what we're presenting to them. So we're looking for a seamless, safe experience for the fan. And then secondly, we have to think about our athletes and our performers and our staff. They come in and they have a lot of needs to be able to perform correctly or set up or participate in the peripheral activities that go on in the event. So we're looking for a safe environment for our performers, athletes, and staff. And then for us, we're looking to be able to use all this tech, the right tech at the right time. So you want to be able to see what's going on, react to what's going on. When you're adding new technology, you want to be able to add it quickly. You want to be able to react and use all that technology at the right time. So there's a lot of different things that we need for those three outcomes, but they also work together. Go ahead, next one. Okay, so what you have is you have data and information systems and you have hardware. And what you're looking for is the appropriate systems exchanging data and performing actions at the time that they need to. So imagine that you want to go to an event, and as a fan, you are able to buy the ticket, plan your trip, and purchase merchandise, purchase food, get a time where you need to arrive, get through security, all seamlessly in one space. How is that all going to work? So if we look at this diagram that I put together, what you want is you want all of those systems, not only data, but hardware, exchanging information with the being connected together under one system, and then being able to send that information back to the hardware or back to the data system. So what results is data-driven decisions and data-driven actions. And in the end, you have a seamless experience for your fan. So all these systems working together give you an overview of what's going on now, what happened during the event, and it gives you the information you need to be able to plan for the future. Okay, go ahead. Next slide. So one of the aspects that you really need for your platform in order for data and hardware to work together is you need to be able to react quickly and add systems to the workflow. So for example, let's take this pandemic, and I'll go through that in more detail, but all of our events wanted to, or looking at adding thermal imaging technology. And as it stands now, most events in the security apparatus, at least, have bolt-on solutions where you have 4 or 5 different pieces of hardware. You have a person manning that station, and because of the pandemic, there was no sort of pathway for people to add technology quickly and assure people that they were doing everything they could to minimize the issues around COVID. So you want your platform to be able to add technology not only to the whole platform, but to the workflow. So these 2 illustrations kind of illustrate to you different things that you could do. I call it the if this, then that. There's a famous little command that's been around for a long time. So a workflow is really, a person scans their ticket. If it's for the right day, then the gate opens. Or a person scans their ticket and takes a temperature detection. If both of those are within the parameters that you set, the gate opens and they can go to their seat. And that's on a simplified version what that technology should be able to do. Now, within that workflow, you should be able to add technology fairly quickly to be able to react to any sort of issues that might come up in the future. So that's key in getting a proper platform. So next slide, please. So the platform itself needs to be all-encompassing. It needs to bridge all of your technology gaps, whether it's an old CCTV system or a brand new drone. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that your interface links and your adapter links all can be brought into this platform to be able to use, not only for the workflow, but to be able to pull out data from those systems. So it needs to be vendor agnostic. It needs to be able to pull in information from any system. So that sort of helps you, decide if you need to upgrade your equipment or if you can just use what you have now. So being able to do that where systems are used by people, you need to also be able to monitor and manage what your people are doing. So what we do is we have what we call a common viewer, and if you can imagine a command center with a lot of monitoring screens, and you have a lot of information, and each person has a role to play, and in that role you're monitoring the actions that they're actually performing, and all of your systems are synchronized together under this one platform. So you have your common viewer. It's got everything in there for you to look at and for your people to be able to make data-driven decisions. You have your operations, so all of those decisions are going back to the equipment or back to the data systems, and you're monitoring traffic or crowds or purchases at a vendor system, and you're automating entry, and then you also have the ability to train your people through this same platform so that you can cross-reference your people. You can put them into a location where they need to be at the time they need to be. You can make human decisions based on your data. And of course, it has to be on infrastructure, but I'll let Cassia speak about that. But you should be able to monitor your network and all of your communications that go through this. So really what you're looking for is a platform that can bring data and equipment, use it, and then return to you reports that give you information that is vital to your business. Okay, next slide. So I've put this little example together, and I'm just going to say this is what we're using with the PGA. So one way, it seems like a lot. It seems like there's a lot that you could do, but really your platform should be able to be used on a small scale and expand exponentially as you need to put things together. So our customer wanted to put on outdoor golf tournaments, and they wanted to be able to use, to have checks for COVID. And one of the pieces of the equipment they needed to add was a thermal imaging system. So our platform, one of the issues with thermal imaging is that if you're going to start recording people's medical data, you need to probably have that under privacy laws that exist, so that you can't just write it on a clipboard and take the piece of paper and hand it over to some random person, okay? So we actually took our platform and created a secure digital system where once that person is actually, their temperature is checked, it can be recorded in the system. Now, what we can do is we can take that recording, and it could possibly, we don't do this now, but it could possibly talk back to the ticketing system. So if that person is rejected at the gate and is not allowed to come in, it could automatically talk to the parking system, the ticketing system, the marketing team, all those people automatically, so that in the end you had a report on why that person wasn't let in. That person could get a refund, they could get their vehicle, all a number of steps that makes it more convenient for them. So just real quick, it's a simple start of getting a platform into your event space. And this is what we did using thermal imaging. So just in a nutshell, thermal imaging system, we wanted to be able to track a mass amount of people. We didn't want to be able to just track one person at a time. So we have a mass system first. So this is a non-intrusive primary system. Then if someone actually has a high temperature, then we go ahead and we ask them to step aside and we do an individual verification of the temperature. And this is where if their temperature is high, then we actually start collecting the data into the platform. So their name and their ticket number and what their temperature range might have been. So here's where the information data pack starts. Then after that, you're able to, or the event management company is able to create a report if there were, say, on the number of people that were not able to come in, what their temperatures were. They're able to have that available for any of the local medical authorities that need to take a look at that. So there are reports available, and then you can distribute the data. Like I said, it could be hooked up to a ticketing system where it automatically issued a refund. It could be hooked up to the marketing system and they could go through a series of steps automatically to reach out to that person. Okay, and then of course you're able to audit it in the end in case you need to have it for regulatory purposes, but really for your own management purposes. So this is sort of, you can start simple with this technology, and the same process can be looked at or mapped out for a security portal, for a parking portal, an exchange between ticketing and the security portal, or ticketing the security portal and some of the vendors inside. So you don't have to actually map out a huge program in order to get started with this type of technology today. So this is my possibilities graphic where I say, you know, once you get one location connected, that location is then able to speak to other locations. So now you can kind of put together a package of, you know, maybe you're putting together an experiential trip where people have to work on their flights and their hotels and their transportation and, you know, getting on the transportation, a cruise ship or whatnot, and all the vendors. And so with a platform that has data-driven decisions and data-driven actions, you can connect multiple systems in multiple locations and multiple venues into one system. And then you can use that information and distribute it to who needs it, at what time they need it, and what they need to use. Do I have another slide? So just to summarize, the key aspects for connecting systems under a platform is vendor agnostic. You want data communication, and that means data communication between actual databases and equipment data, okay? You want to be able to design your workflow in sort of an if this then that situation. You want to be able to make sure your people are trained through it so that you can measure how they're performing against what you actually need. And then you want to be able to look at all your metrics, your network, your operations, your systems, your humans, and be able to use that in order so you can plan better for the future. And under all that, you need it on a secure infrastructure. And I think this is my last slide, and this is where Cassia comes in. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Melissa. And looking at some of the questions that are coming in, I know we've had questions on public health, and certainly I know Melissa, she gave thermal imaging cameras as an example of how they've built out workflow. But if you are interested in looking a little more into that, we have a thermal imaging forum that was conducted a while back that is available on our website. You can go to ncs4.edu, and at the top you can see the online forums button. And we dedicated an entire segment to discuss thermal imaging. Same thing with privacy information. We had legal considerations that were covered last month, so you can go onto the website and you'll see where we have the full hour segment recorded and available to you with with some resources accompanying them. So certainly encourage you to take a look at that as we navigate some of the public health issues and certain legal ramifications of what's going on in the world today. So one of the questions here, Melissa, you mentioned integration, and at times for some of us, it may have gotten a little technical, but the question would be like, where do we start when we're talking about integration? We have all of these different systems in place now, and we're many times within the industry, we're working and managing those things individually. So when we're looking at integration as a whole, where do you begin?
So I think Jean could also be very valuable in answering this question, but I would actually want someone to sit down and kind of figure out how they want their fan to participate in the event from a fan perspective, from an athlete perspective, and then what the actual event management company needs. So I would just take a look at your next event or your venue and see what, maybe you can just hook up 2 systems at a time, and take a look at what you could do easily to get started on the platform. Because the platform you choose should be easily upgradable, easily add systems. You know, starting simple with 1 or 2 systems, or 1 or 2 systems with a command, with an automated command, makes it easier for you to expand upon it as you grow and as your needs grow.
Absolutely, and with all of this data that we are generating, we're a big concern for us that's been brought up on several occasions is how we're managing that data, how we're maintaining that data. We have retention policies on videos. We have to make sure that we're keeping things, if it's anything privacy information related, we have to make sure it's secured, which really brings us into the next discussion, which is where Cassia with Amazon Web Services, she can kind of speak toward this infrastructure, both physical and cloud infrastructure, edge computing, so that we can kind of get an understanding of how we're managing that data effectively and efficiently. So with that said, go ahead, Cassia.
Hey, thanks very much, Daniel. So hello, everybody. I am Cassia Martin. My work is as a solutions architect, so I'm very focused on the engineering side of how to solve these problems. And when I think about all the things Melissa and Jean have been talking about, having all this tremendous data from vendor and parking and security and ticketing and concessions and everything, I just think of the tremendous possibilities of what problems you could solve if you had knew the state of everything and could reason on top of that data, but also some of the challenges that come with building out a secure foundation to be able to do work on there. So in terms of what people are trying to accomplish, there we go. I have seen so many customers doing so many different kinds of work in fields of, anything from farming to transportation, and you all are thinking very heavily about safety, about tracking inventory. You just have a ton of different areas of collecting information, and I think of the opportunity in 2 separate spaces. The first is operational efficiency, right? If you can collect this data, you can make your business operations more efficient. You can make more intelligent decisions faster, and over time, develop a very data-driven discipline. On the other side, on the top end, you can also grow revenue. So you can. Oh, I think we went 1 too far. I think I was trying to click and you were trying to click at the same time. Perhaps that was what went wrong. Can I go back? Aha, very good. Okay. So you can make better relationships with your customers by getting to know them better, make products that get better over time. And you'll also be able to develop new services and business models. All of these lead to bigger revenue growth, greater operational efficiency. It's a win for everybody. Now, knowing that that's what we're trying to accomplish, what I start thinking about is how, how do you get there? And the model I like for that is the IoT virtuous cycle. And this is actually exactly what Melissa was just talking about, how you can start small and then expand exponentially. So you start in the bottom right corner here under device software. So this is a question of, how am I going to run my software on the edge? What are my sensors going to be? How do I collect the data? How do I operate? And then once you have the devices operating, you'll go into the next green section, the connectivity and control services. You want to send that data that you've collected into the cloud. And the question you start asking yourself is, how do I control, manage, and secure my devices at scale? Because you don't want to stop with just 2 devices. You want to have dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands. And then the last part, the top of this virtuous cycle, is analytics services. Once you have all the data centralized and collected, then you can start to reason on top of that data and get those outcomes that we were talking about in terms of better operational efficiencies and improved revenue. So this cycle, all of what comes out of this cycle is intelligence and outcomes that you can use in your business. And as you go around it and you deploy more devices and get more data and do more analytics, that only increases the opportunities that you have. So let's talk about, in particular, that green section at the bottom that was connectivity and control services. Melissa talked about you need to build a secure foundation before you start. So when we're talking about security, what kind of threats are we worried about? There's a couple different pieces. And threats are and countermeasures, they're constantly evolving. So what I'm going to talk through now is just a brief glimpse into the space where I do a ton of my work in security. When devices are first created, you have to think about their integrity. Are they counterfeited? Did they come from the right manufacturer? Were they bought through a legitimate supply chain? And the software that was on it, the firmware is what it's called, is that reliable? Has that been tampered with in any way? Then you have a challenge when you're actually operating the devices themselves, where you take responsibility for operating them. So you have to make sure that the traffic that sends out your data is secure using HTTPS, so that no one can intercept your traffic and learn about the different data that's going back and forth between your devices. And you need to make sure that they don't have any antivirus software, have any viruses on them. You need to make sure that people can't log in with bad passwords. And then even when you're done using the devices, you'll still be thinking about proper sunsetting and termination. You really want to make sure that there's no personal information or secrets on the device themselves, and make sure you have proper disposal techniques, and make sure that you're turning off any servers that you use. So again, threats and countermeasures, constantly moving target. This is just a glimpse. But let's dive a little bit more. Now that we know what we're worried about, let's give you solutions. How do you build a process to make sure that you're operating in a secure way? So I'm going to talk about 3 different domains. The first domain here is device management. And a lot of that has to do with what Melissa was talking about. What you have to think about doing things at scale, right? So when you're first starting out, maybe you'll buy one device and have somebody walk up with a keyboard and plug it in and start typing commands to start it up. But that's not going to be your long-term solution. You need a system that allows you to manage a fleet, so easily onboard dozens or hundreds of devices simultaneously. Similarly, you want an index, you want an organized list of all the devices that you've got running in a central place, so that you can ask questions and you can actively monitor all the different devices, and you can say, what's the state of all my cameras, or what's the state of all my temperature scanners. Similarly, because there's software running on these things, and just like with your computer, you need to run Windows or Mac updates on these IoT devices. Similarly, you need to make sure that you are updating the software, because sometimes somebody might find a vulnerability, or there might be a new kind of attack. So you need to have a system in place for live updating. The other piece, which I don't mention here, but I think is incredibly important, is that just because we're talking about digital devices doesn't mean we can forget the physical security. if a threat person can walk up directly to some of your IoT devices and start changing configuration settings or just grab the hard disk off of it, then there's limits on what digital security controls are going to do. So physical security controls are also part of a complete device management system. The second domain I'm talking about is secure connectivity. The main thing you have to think about here is to make sure you're always using encryption. So that means HTTPS. That means when you're sending data from a device to a central server, that's always being sent over an encrypted channel. And that's something that almost all of your devices are going to have built in, but you do need to make the effort to configure it and make sure that it's running well. And what that does is it prevents anyone who's able to listen in on the wire to see the data from intercepting and potentially changing any of the information that goes there. The other part of secure connectivity is authentication, and you want mutual authentication. What that means is that when your devices are sending out data, they're not going to just send out data to anywhere they connect to. They're going to make sure they're connecting directly to your server, to your administrators. And vice versa, the mutual part is that when your administrators are connecting to your devices, you want to make sure that they are connecting to the right place, that they're not typing in their usernames and passwords into some random attacker's device. And the last part here is fine-grained authorization. So one of the failure modes I see sometimes is, maybe somebody just has a single username and password across all of their hundreds of devices. And that's not a great model for security. What you want is to really limit the access that people have so that each person has their own account, their own user that they somehow sign in as, and that user is granted only the permission they need to do their job. So only get access to the ticketing systems if that's what they need, or only access to parking if that's what their job is, etc. The last domain I'm going to talk about is detection and alerting. And Melissa started to talk about this too. It's how you can start taking all this work that you're putting into getting data and equipment and getting actionable reports out of it. And you want to have a common platform. That's the real thing. You definitely don't want to have to walk manually to each of your devices to get the information. So you want to be able to audit the configuration. You want to be able to check pretty easily, are all my devices using encryption for their communication? That's sort of a basic question that you want things to be very centralized to be able to ask. You also want to continuously monitor your device behavior. And that means a whole bunch of different things based on metrics. So whether that's, if on the very technical detailed level, it's, the number of packets or the volume or what ports it's accessing. But you want to have a continuous record of what normal looks like. And the reason for that is that then you can identify anomalies. So you can have a baseline, and then you can say, oh, all of a sudden we have 100 times as much traffic coming from this device than has ever come out of there before. That's unusual. And if you know what unusual looks like, then you can alert on it and you can investigate it. So building these kinds of capabilities for information gathering, for monitoring, gives you the power to be on top of your devices to understand what you're doing. So in summary, the most important things to remember when you're building out this secure foundation that will allow you to get value out of all this data that you're generating. First of all, absolutely make sure all your internet connections are encrypted. That's key. You also need to maintain the physical security so that nobody can tamper with the devices. And you want to centralize all the device logs so that you can notice, you can watch and monitor and alert and investigate on anything that looks unusual. Finally, because these are computers at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have a good system in place for patching and for getting new updates installed on the device. And ideally, that's an over-the-air update mechanism, which means that just whenever the machines are connected to the internet, they go out and check whether they need a new update, and then they just install it. Or it's something you can push out from your central system. And to note, I've said before, but I'll say it again, the threats and countermeasures are always evolving. So just like the IoT virtuous cycle, it's something that you live and you're constantly building and analyzing data and getting new outcomes and value and information out of it. In the same way, building out security is never going to be a one and done operation. You'll build a foundation at the beginning, but it's a living process where you'll constantly be made aware of new areas where you can build improvements and learn about new threats and countermeasures. But hopefully this gave you a start on how to think about it. Thank you very much for your time. And back to Dan.
All right, thank you, Cassia. We have a couple questions, but before I get to that, we did have thermal imaging technologies and a couple of other things come up again in the questions area. So again, encourage you to take advantage of the forums that we have posted on the website. And again, we discuss thermal imaging as a practice and as a technology in greater detail within the other forum. Particularly, someone was concerned with the relevance of thermal imaging in an outdoor venue and some of the concerns surrounding it. And that's come up a couple of times throughout this discussion. So again, I definitely encourage you to take a look at our online forums, and we have some additional resources there for you, and resources are continuously coming down as it relates to public health screening. And also, for those of you that are interested, later in the month, we'll be hosting a forum that's not so focused on detecting COVID-19, but disinfecting and decontaminating COVID-19 and other contagions. So we'll be taking a hard look at what cleaning procedures are and what's effectively going to combat the presence of a contagion at your venues. So please stay tuned for that. Now back to Cassie, a couple questions we did have. First off, you covered a lot of the surface level things we need to know as it relates to the devices we're connecting to our networks at the venues. But if we want to dig deeper and we want to get more information as we start planning and we start taking a hard look at how effectively and efficiently we're set up with those, what are some resources out there available to us?
Sure. Oh yeah, there's tons of resources out there. So I didn't mention too deeply any particular products, but I do work for AWS. So we do have obviously lots of offerings in this space. And one of my favorite talks, actually at our reInvent conference that we have every year, we have a whole track on IoT, Internet of Things. And one of my favorite ones that I recommend is actually from 2018. There was a leadership session called IoT 218-L. I mean, there's tons of other ones, but that was just one I really liked because it had a good speaker and made some of the challenges really clear. And that's sort of the 1 hour version of the sort of 10-minute spiel I gave today, and diving into particular products that you can use to start bringing some sort of machine learning and inference and training and all those powerful cloud-based models that you can use to start innovating on this data.
Absolutely, and as Melissa had mentioned earlier, a lot of these solutions, we're not looking at $10 million solutions. These are incremental changes we can look at, or even just to observe how effectively we're currently operating. So we see the value of moving into the cloud, or at least looking further into cloud capabilities. But what if the internet is down? Having been on the emergency management side and working in operations centers, I know redundancies are always a concern, and sometimes we get caught up in that thought that we don't even want to touch a network with something. We want we don't want to have to rely on internet, and in some cases even power. So from that standpoint, what if the internet is down and we're over relying, we're relying on cloud services?
Sure, so that's a super valid question. And it is a question that you should ask sort of your individual devices and platforms as you build it out. But from an AWS perspective, we absolutely have an expectation that Internet of Things devices don't have to rely on 24/7 connectivity. If you think about that circle that I was walking through, the virtuous cycle, device software is a big chunk of that. And having that connectivity, and then that is what enables you to jump to the next part, which is the analytics services. But if you don't have those analytics services, your baseline is still running. Also, if you're talking about particular solutions, this is coming from my own biased perspective, but we have a really neat product called IoT Greengrass, which is actually intended to bring some of that analytics to the edge so that you can actually act locally on the data you generate while still using the cloud for management and analytics and durable storage. But that way, it basically lets you do some simple filter data and just transmit some of the necessary information on the cloud. Finally, if you're also talking about maybe some physical devices that don't have internet connectivity maybe built in at all, then there are actually technical solutions you can use to sort of bridge that gap, where you can have an IoT core, which is collecting data on your site from different of your IoT devices over, Zigbee or Bluetooth Enemy, or the different physical local protocols that you can use. And so that's something where you can get started without necessarily needing 24/7 or even any internet access at all.
Absolutely, thank you. And we know we have so many systems to help manage the safety, security, and environment really at various events and venues. And certainly the focus here is just trying to build that common operating picture, trying to effectively manage with the staff that we have without having to hire ample more people just to be able to maintain and effectively manage and monitor the traffic of what's going on through our systems. So again, I know that we're getting toward the top of the hour. So are there any closing remarks from you, Cassia, Jean, or Melissa? All right, fantastic. Go ahead.
Hold on. Trying to unmute. I just want to say one more time that the possibilities are endless, but you don't have to look at such a big picture. You really can start small and enhance your fans' experience through a couple little things that might make it that much easier. So don't be afraid to take a look at all your systems and think about where you could go with this. So thank you.
I was going to echo the same comment that Melissa just made, that from an event planner standpoint, looking at it from my perspective, it's overwhelming. It's very intimidating to look at the long view and the long-term integration of all this different technology, but you've got to start somewhere, and it's literally one step at a time. And then before you know it, you look up and you've made substantial progress. Also, I think we as event planners have to recognize we're going to have to invest time and some money to make this happen. But it's a great investment that will give us great return on our investment. And the two companies represented today on this call are great technology companies, obviously. And you have to look toward these types of companies. We already partner with S2 Global. They provide the guidance and direction that someone like myself or my company need to get where we need to go.
Absolutely. Thank you all for your time and your energy and certainly your expertise in this call. We certainly hope we're going to start wrapping things up here, but we certainly hope to see all of you here in the near future at webinars, and hopefully by then you'll be able to see us as well. So With that said, we're going to wrap up here. Again, thank you. I encourage you to all take a look at what forms we have available on our website. We're trying to make sure that we're providing as many resources to you as we can in a time where we need as much information as we can get. So please, if any of you need us for anything, don't hesitate to reach out to the center. I know myself and the rest of the team would be more than happy to connect with you and certainly try to connect you with the right information, with the right resources. So again, thank you all for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future. Goodbye.